Okay. Evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Shavuos Daf Yud Gimel, and we're starting 5 lines from the bottom of Yud Beis and Mid Beis. Just as a scheduling note, I'm not going to be here tomorrow night, and Rabbi Ruvain Handler will be here, Emir Tashem, to learn together with you, as well as at least one night, probably 2 nights next week that I won't be here. So it says the Gemara as follows: Hi asay hechidami. Our Mishnah spoke about a case where a person didn't do a mitzvah asay. They skipped tefillin, they skipped lulav and esrog. Bris milah is not a great example because there's a chiyuv kares, but let's just talk about a typical asay. So it says the Gemara, what's the case? Idelo avad tshuva. If the guy never did tshuva for the asay that he skipped, so it says the Gemara, zevach rishayim toiva. Nobody wants your korbanos. You're not getting tshuva for the asay that you didn't ask for forgiveness on. And ida avad tshuva kol yom anami. Then what does this have to do with korbanos on special days? I can always get kapara for the asay that I don't do just by asking for kapara. How do I know that? The Tanya, because the Brisa says, and we should hold on to this. It's quoted in the Rambam Lahalacha in Hilchos Tshuva. Avar al mitzvahs asay ve'asa tshuva lo zaz mishama ad shemochlim lo. No problem. If you do something wrong, you are mevatel a mitzvah, you skip benching. Yeah, again, any real mitzvah says that you skip benching, you skip birchos Torah, all the essays, no lulav and esrog, no tefillin, and you ask for mechila asa tshuva, you clap al chet. The halacha is lo zaz misham ad shemochlim lo. You're done. So then, what is this scenario that a korban on the moed, korban on Yom Kippur, the assay is done already? Either you didn't do tshuva and you're done for because zevach rishayim toeva, or you did tshuva but it applied the day up. Says the Gemara, Amar Bzeira be'omed b'mardo. Really, this person didn't do tshuva, but the Rebbe. Let's take a look at a Rashi here. Rashi at the top of the page on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph Dibur Maschil ve'omed b'mardo delo avad tshuva ay udekashelach zevach rishayim toeva mas nisin Rebbe the Amar Yom Kippur mechaper al she'enon shavin. Thank God. I'm so happy to hear that. It makes me feel better. Is that for the things that I may not be willing to ask tshuva for because I'm not mature enough to do it, or whatever the case may be, and certainly for the ones that are beyond my memory.
This korban is being brought even before Yom Kippur.
No, it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah saseh. So there's no korbanos by mitzvah saseh. Zebach Rishayim To'eva is a tagline. Yeah, it's just saying nobody wants to hear from you. You're not getting tshuva no matter what you do, because even by the korban on Yom Kippur it won't happen because you're a Russia. And let's see what it means for Rebbe. The Gemara says at the top line, Tanya, Rebbe Omer, al kol averos shebetorah, bein asa tshuva, bein lo asa tshuva, Yom Kippur mechaper, that no matter what averos you did, positive or negative, Yom Kippurim is mechaper. Again, thank God. Hopefully we hold like Rebbe. Why? Because that means that no matter what averos you do, you have coverage. It's itzumo shel Yom of Yom Kippur, it's the korbanos of the day. Fine. However, there are 3 exceptions, even according to Rebbe. Rebbe wants to say that even if you're omed b'mardo, even if you're going to stand and say, I don't care that I skipped tefillin, I'm not going to ask for tshuva. Even if you do that, he says you're still going to get kapara because Rebbe holds uniquely against other people, as we'll soon see. He holds that Yom Kippur is mechaper mimon of shach. It doesn't matter what you do. Here are the exceptions. Chutz mi porik ol. What's that? Yeah, that's what it says. Bein asa tshuva, bein lo asa tshuva, black on white.
Very different than what we've been taught all our lives.
Maybe we don't hold like Rebbe. But the hashkafa of this is like parenting, where our children, for all of their crimes, our love for them is greater than their crimes.
There has to be a different sort of kapara to achieve that. To achieve kapara, that begs the question.
We usually rely on the Rambam's definition of tshuva, of charata, kabbalah ala asid. We usually have a bit of a more stark lens about what tshuva is. That's how we define tshuva. What the Rambam is not dealing with.
Some steps ends up in the same place as somebody who does nothing.
Okay, your question stands. You're saying that.
I don't have a basis for that.
I know. That's an emotional reaction to a Gemara.
It's something internal.
That's
You
true by
get more
that.
from it.
So what we're talking about is the guy who says I'm not doing tshuva and the guy who says I'm doing tshuva, is the result the same after Yom Kippur? Motzei Yom Kippur, you're about to say Slach Lanu by Mariv after Yom Kippur. Are you the same people? Are you the same yid with a clean slate? Because what does it mean that Yom Kippur is mechaper? You have a clean slate. So they both have a clean slate. So David wants to say, I don't have a Marim Makom, but they have to be different. I'm saying you.
I agree. No, that's it. I was saying. They both
You can't say it.
Yeah. Work on it.
He'll have more schar, but we're not talking about schar. We're talking about a clean slate. Well, the guy who didn't do tshuva is much more likely to slip again because he doesn't.
But at this particular point, the guy who worked on it, it means more to him than the person who didn't.
Yeah. What does that have to do with kapara? I agree with you.
He's in the washing machine.
He's in the washing machine. That's a great mashal. Bleached. But there are three exceptions. Chutz mi porik ol, which Rashi says is kofer be'ikr. That person has to do tshuva in order to get tshuva. Umegala panim b'Torah, Rashi says ba al divrei Torah bechutzpah uvegilui azus panav. And then lastly, umefer bris bebasar, Rashi says this is talking about bris milah. Either they're moshech be'or lasso, where people would actually regret the decision to get a bris, and what they would do, and this isn't articulated here, but I've heard it elsewhere, that they would place weights on the skin right by the makom achituch and stretch the skin longer. I don't know if that works the Maisa. No? I don't think there are real reverse. I in my WhatsApp chat today with the Mo'alim that I'm a part of. Don't join the chat. Don't join the chat. But in that chat, one guy said there's a surgical procedure, and he showed like a pencil drawing from a surgical book of how to be Moshe Chorlaso, and they do an incision down by the base of the anatomy, and they create a little gap that allows for the skin to slide forward, and then they just let the skin grow in, or they graft skin there in order to reverse. I don't know if it works. Lamaisa, are you now an Arel? I don't know how that works in Arel. Can you go from Arel to from Nemo to Arel? I don't know what the Lamdas is. I've never learned the Rishonim on this. I don't know. But anyways, I'll share the picture. Nah, I won't share the picture. So the Gemara says that in all of these cases, in these three, Sheim Asa Tshuva Yom HaKippur Mechaper, but Ve'im Lav and Yom HaKippur Mechaper. My time of the Rebbe. Why does Rebbe hold this way? That even a person who's Omed B'mardo, that they get coverage for their Averas. So it says the Gemara D'Tanya, Kidvar Hashem Bazal, that he was Mevazeh Hashem. What is this talking about? The bizui over here that's being spoken about is Zeporik, all the Megalapan and Torah, the first two. Ves mitzvah sohefar. What is that talking about? So the Gemara says, Zeh mefer bris basar. The rest of the pasuk will continue the drasha. Ikaris tikaris, he'll get karis. Ikaris lifnei Yom Kippurim, tikaris la'achar Yom Kippurim. That with these people, again, remember, only if they do tshuva. If these people don't do tshuva, Yom Kippur is not mechaper, right? So there's Megalapan, the Moshech b'Bsar. Says the Gemara, Yachol afilu asa tshuva. Maybe we would say they get kares even if they did tshuva. Tamalomar avon haba lo amarti lebizman shavon haba. But if you do tshuva, then there's no avon anymore. So then, no problem. Then Yom Kippur is mechaper. That's not a problem. He's not out to get us. But this person can do tshuva. If a person is porek all, and then they decide that no, you know what, I made a mistake. I've been a kofar my whole life, and now Erev Yom Kippur, Kadosh Baruch Hu, al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'frikas all, and we're good to go. And that's considered a kapara. So that's the shita of Rebbe. And the Gemara says, "V'Rabbanan." What about those who disagree with Rebbe? Says the Gemara, "He kares b'olam hazeh, ti kares l'olam haba." They're done. Avon haba, shim asa tshuva umeis misa memarekas. Death will help. Death will help, but you're done for. Okay, no, we're not going to learn that shita right now. Umi matzis mukmas lo kirebi. Is it possible to say that our Mishnah is like the shita of Rebbe? After all, the Sefer Rabbi Yehuda, Reisha Nami Rabbi Yehuda. If you're going to say that that we're talking about Rebbe over here, remember what we're talking about that we started with, this mitzvah say of our Mishnah. We created this miman of shach question. So says the Gemara, if you're going to say that that's Rebbe, that's a problem because the Sefer Rabbi Yehuda, Reisha Nami Rabbi Yehuda. The Ketani Seifa. How do we know that the Seifa is Rabbi Yehuda? Because the Seifa is not talking about our case. Our case is talking about whether or not you can get tshuva if you're omeid b'mardo, which Rabbi Yehuda says yes. But what's the Seifa? An unrelated sugya. Echad Yisrael ve'echad Kohen ve'echad Kohen mashuach. That all of them get kapara. And Uman Isle Haisvara, who's the one who holds that part of the Mishnah? Who is the author of that part of the Mishnah? So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, Michlal, that if the Seif is Rabbi Yehuda, Michlal the Reish is also Rabbi Yehuda. So how can you say it's Rabbi? So Amar Rabbi Yosef, don't worry. The din of Echad Yisrael, Echad Kohen, Echad Mashuach, that's also Rabbi. The Savar like Rabbi Yehuda. He happens to hold like Rabbi Yehuda in regards to that din. So that means with the second din that we learned, the Seifa of Echad Yisrael, Echad Kohen, Echad, so there Rabbi and Rabbi Yehuda agree. But the first din of the mitzvah aseh, that only Rebbe holds up, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold up. It's all nameless, by the way, so it's very hard to know this without learning this Gemara, but that's what the Gemara says. Amar le Abaye, when you say that, when you, Rav Yosef, say that it's Rebbe and V'savar lak Rabbi Yehuda, was that Dafka Ka'amar Mar? Remember, Abaye was a Talmud of Rav Yosef. Abaye was always the one that said, Rebbe, you're the one who taught this to us, you just forgot. V'ati, you're the one who taught us it. So here, this was before Rav Yosef lost his memory. Amar le Abaye Dafka Kamar Mar, that Rebbe is Savar like Rabbi Yehuda, Aval Rabbi Yehuda lo Savar like Rabbi Yehuda. Rebbe, do they not hold like each other? Do they hold like each other in all cases? Yes or no? Odilmami the Rebbe Savar like Rabbi Yehuda, Af Rabbi Yehuda Savar like Nami Rebbe. Maybe that perhaps also in the other din that we're talking about, the din of the mitzvah saseh, that there's tshuva even if you're omeid b'mardo, provided that it's not one of the big three. So would Rabbi Yehuda agree with that? Mihu orcha the milsaktani. It just wasn't a polite way to write otherwise, because lememar the Talmud savar laki Rebbe. That's not nice to say it that way. So Rebbe was a Talmud of Rabbi Yehuda. So you only wanted to say that Rebbe savar laki Rabbi Yehuda, that's the polite way to say it. So when you say Rebbe savar laki Rabbi Yehuda, that the Kohen Mashuach, that all of them are the same, does that mean that Rabbi Yehuda now holds like Rebbe, that the mitzvah saseh is getting kapara even if they were omeid b'mardo and didn't do tshuva? Amar le'in, Rabbi Yosef says to Abai, that is what I mean. Dafka kamina, Rebbe savar lak Rabbi Yehuda, aval Rabbi Yehuda lo savar lak Rebbe. We know that Rabbi Yehuda himself doesn't agree to Rebbe about this din of the mitzvah saseh. And let's see how we know this. We're more than halfway down on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Tanya, Yachol yehi Yom Kippur mechaper al shavim ve'al she'enon shavim. We already know this is not Rebbe, because Rebbe at the top of the page was ready to go. He said, "Bein she'asa tshuva, bein lo asa tshuva, you get kapar." This Bryce is clearly not Rebbe. So the Gemara wants to know, Yachol, that you might have said that by Yom Kippur, mechaper al shavim al she'enon shavim. You might have thought that Yom Kippur is mechaper whether or not you do tshuva. The dinhu, I could have argued that this is not even a logical thing to say. How so? When it comes to these types of corrective measure korbanos, mechapren, the Yom Kippurin mechaper, just like the chatas and the asham are mechaper, so to Yom Kippur is mechaper. And what would that have taught us? Machatas ve'asham ein mechaperin ela al hashavim. If I were to bring a chatas or an asham for a crime that I did, the only way those korbanos work is if I do tshuva. They don't work in a vacuum. They don't work just because I brought them. So Af Yom Kippurim, because there's a comparison between Yom Kippur, the Chatas and Asham on the one side, and Yom Kippur on the other, so then Af Yom Kippurim en mechaper el al Shabbat. So maybe I should say that no, that there is no such thing as tshuva on Yom Kippur unless you are mechaper. Says the Gemara, well, that's not so simple. Malachatas v'asham she'ein mechaper el al hamezid k'shogeg. By a chatas and asham, you don't get kapara on a mezid. You only get kapara on a shogeg. We don't bring korbanos of an asham or a chatas if you do something wrong b'mezid. So Tomar Yom Kippurim shemechaper al hamezid k'shogeg, and hol mechaper al hamezid k'shogeg yichaper al shavim ve'al she'ein shavim. And if that's true, then perhaps you should get kapara altogether. Talmud Lomar says Rabbi Yehuda, no, ach chalak. The word ach, and this is from the pasuk of ach be'asor l'chodesh hashvi'i. Ach is a restrictive word. Ach and verakin are restrictive words. So over here we see that ach is a restrictive word. What does that show you? That no, you're not able to get kapara unless you do tshuva. So we have a machlokes tanaim. It's good yedias klalius. How powerful is Yom Kippur? Do we say like Rebbe, that minus 3 averas that we mentioned at the top of the page, bein asa tshuva, bein lo asa tshuva, Yom Kippur is mechaper, which is, please God, I hope that's how we paskin. Or do we say like Rabbi Yehuda, that if you do tshuva, you're good to go, but if you don't do tshuva, you're not good to go? So sometimes we go through this, and I've heard Rabbi Robinson say things like this before, that it seems to be that we're clapping al chet on the same averas every year. You come back 11, 12 months later, you're like, al chet shechatanu on the same thing that I clapped on last year. How much did I go? Yes, but We understand that we have our wiring that needs to be changed. Maskim, that's why we learn Musar to change our wiring. But Lamaisa, at that time, your ritzonos are there. You don't want to do this Havera, so that's considered proper tshuva. So Baruch Hashem, when we go into Yom Kippur that way, Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have a choice. He promised us that we're going to get tshuva in those cases. The question is, what happens if we don't do tshuva? What happens to the yid who went off the derech? What happens to the yid who never knew that they were on a derech? They had no clue. So Yom Kippur is mechaper according to Rebbe. Unless you're Megal upon him Torah, like that's like the real heretic who knows Hashkafa and he rejects that. It's a whole nother level. And you're Megal upon him Torah, you're rude. Okay, fine. Machlok es Tanoi.
We don't have to have 24 hours in a night.
It's actually not the davening that generates the kapara. It's Hitzumo Shel Yom, and it is the korbanos. Ad kedei kach, that if a person has to choose, and let's say this was the only two options, you're either in bed all day or you break the fast. Pasha, you're in bed all day. It's kares. So Elamai, how do you get kapara? Because it's Hitzumo Shel Yom. It's not the davening. The davening is the tshuva process, and great for us, the way we're wired. The davening is the tshuva process, and the Sana Tokef, all the things that are ma'ora, that's what creates, and all the pre-work that we do prior to Yom Kippur, where we like, what should I work on this year? One of my Rabbeim shared with me in the name of Rav Volba a beautiful idea. He said, when you're not sure what to work on in the Rosh Hashanah season and the Yom Noraim season, do you pick something that is a halachic violation? Or do you pick the area in which you're the biggest mushchas? The area is not, maybe it's not halacha, but it's so not being a yid. It's just not the Yiddish way. So he said it's pashut that you pick the mushchas area. Halacha will come. But you should pick the area in which you're the biggest mushchas and change. So that's how you navigate the Yom Noraim, which was fascinating. I can think of areas of halacha that I don't keep very well. I'm sure we all can. So that's a very fascinating insight that Revolba held, that you pick the area in which you're a mushchas instead of the area of shachan and tzazim. It's fascinating. Yeah, what big shoulders do you have to say work on the mushchas stuff instead of the halachic stuff? Today, I was at the school meeting today. A Talmud walked in to ask the principal of Shiloh while I was standing there. They had a bag of cut up, it was a gallon Ziploc bag with cut up garments inside. Looked like a jersey. So the Talmidim walked in, they said, we wanted to ask the Menahel of Shiloh. So I'm sitting there, I'm the outsider, I'm just listening. Talmud, the three boys, they go up to the Rebbe, they say, this jersey belongs to a basketball player, he's an anti-Semite. Rebbe, should we burn the jersey on Lag BaOmer in the fire? It's adorable. And I'm sitting there, I'm trained as an educator, and I'm like, please answer this question correctly, because otherwise I'm going to have to say something out loud. And he was smooth as silk. He said, that's not how the Yidden behave. It's not a pasnish. That's not a, Yidden don't work in rage. If they're Baalei Kas, that's theirs. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to protect us. We don't do that. He said, I'll take care of it. I'll throw it out for you. Don't worry about it. You can leave it with me. And then he said what he was worried about. He said, if we did work in rage, so you're unhappy with this basketball player, how do you respond with rage? What happens when you're unhappy with your English teacher? Are you also going to respond with rage? Yidden don't respond with rage. And then the kid pandered to the principal and said, like, Rebbe, Yidden don't respond with rage. And a little pat on the shoulder, sayonara, get out of my office. It was a cute little story. But that's a mushchas idea that we're Yidden. We don't respond with rage. So you do that, or you're chumrah and chalav Yisrael. Forget the chumras and chalav Yisrael. Go work on your midos. Pashat the chumras should not be first. That's for sure. Okay, says the Gemara. What?
That's where that beard's wearing the jersey.
Wearing that jersey. Wearing the jersey. The kids, Mamish cut it up into 1,000 pieces. It was a Celtics jersey. It's Kyrie Irving. They Mamish cut it up into 1,000 pieces. It looked like confetti by the time I saw it, which was rage itself. Say they were late to the party. I mean, they're kids. Obviously, they were like third, fourth, fifth grade. They were young. But I felt peeking. How did they pull that off? I don't know. They brought.
Who do they pull it off?
Yeah, I know, seriously. By the way, one of the Rabbeim who I was meeting with said, "Is it a real jersey, or was it like a replica?" Right. And the kids was like, "No, it was a real jersey." I'm like, "No, it's not." That would be thousands of dollars. I'm like, where did they get it? It was a replica. $29.99, reduced to rubble. All right, let's continue. 12 lines from the bottom on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. The Gemara says that we have a little bit of a problem about authorship, and what we just learned was actually a sifra, and the Gemara says Stam sifra money. Rabbi Yehuda, the Kamar. What do we see in this brisa? That shavim in lo shavim lo, and that's why we see that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold like Rabbi when it comes to this idea of the power of Yom Kippur. According to Rabbi, the power of Yom Kippur is being asa tshuva and lo asa tshuva. Yom Kippur Itzumos Yom is mechaper. You're good to go. Rabbi Huda is not maskim, and that's where it's located. And it's sifra, and a stam sifra is Rabbi Huda machlokas tanoim. And not only is and that's how we see our machlokas between Rabbi Huda and the Rabbanon. Says the Gemara. Wait 1 second. Virami stam sifra stam sifra. That's nice that you found one stam sifra that seems to say, like Rabbi Huda, that if you do tshuva, great, and if you don't, then too bad. But there's another sifra that doesn't agree. The Tanya. The Gemara says as follows: maybe Yom Kippur only works if you fast. V'karu mikra kodesh, and you. This is a machlokas what v'karu mikra kodesh means. Rashi over here says that lo karu mikra kodesh is lo kiblu b'verchos of lomar mekadesh yisrael Yom Kippurim. You weren't assigned the bracha the right way, which is interesting that you might have had a havamina that the makeh b'patish of your tshuva is saying. We're davening out of a machzer, but if we space out, we could have said mechadesh chodashim. We could have said 100 things. Mechadesh Shavuos would probably be even more. So maybe you have to only get tshuva if you fast, if you're v'kar mikra kodesh and v'lo asa b'malacha, and you didn't do any violations of halacha. But lo hisanebo, if you didn't fast, v'lo kar mikra kodesh, and you didn't daven correctly, v'asa b'malacha minayin. How do we know that there's still tshuva? Meaning, even with your mistakes, there's tshuva. Talmud lomar Yom Kippurim mikol makom. So this Tam Sifra seems to say tshuva or not, even if you didn't fast. And Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of tinokos shenishba in the suburbs. They pasha don't know one an aleph from a base. They don't know anything. Of course, they're not going to fast. So, yeah, till noon, till 5 o'clock. I didn't drink anything last night, but by morning time. So the Gemara says, Mikol Makom. So now we have a machlokas and two stam sifras. The first stam sifra, which we attributed to Rabbi Huda, says that if you do tshuva, you're great, and if you don't do tshuva, you're not great. The second sifra says, no, you get tshuva no matter what, whether or not you do tshuva. So steer in the two stam sifras. It says the Gemara, Amar Bai Lokasha, Ha Rebbe, Ha Rabbi Huda. And we know what the party lines are. We know that this sifra must be Rebbe, and the other one must be Rabbi Huda. This sifra, which says Mikol Makom, Yom Kippurim, Mikol Makom, that's Rebbe. L'shitaso, the bein asa tshuva and lo asa tshuva, you get kapar. Masha ein kein. In the first sifra, that has to be Rabbi Huda, who holds that you only get tshuva if you do tshuva. Otherwise, Yom Kippur won't help you. So that's answer number one. We're going to end up concluding like this, but Rava does try and attempt a second answer. Rava Amar Hava Rebbe. Maybe both of them are Rebbe. Umod Rebbe bekares to Yoma. And of course, Rebbe has to admit that there is a possible case of kares on Yom Kippur. Dilote mahachi kares Yom Kippurim Rebbe Lesle. That's impossible. There can't be that there's no kares bo bayom. How is that possible? Alama lo? Really? Is that true? Says the Gemara. Mishkachas la. We can have a case scenario as follows: Kigon to avad valelia umis delo asa yamama lekipurele lechapurele. We could have a case scenario where a person could avoid kares on Yom Kippur. How so? Which is that if a person was avad valelia umis, he did something wrong on the night of Yom Kippurim, and then he died before he got to the daytime. Rashi, she'ein mechaper ela yom, kedichsiv ki vayom hazeh yechaper aleh. The time of kapara of Yom Kippur is not at night. The time of kapara of Yom Kippur is during daylight hours. If you don't hit daylight hours, no kapara. That's what the Gemara seems to say. Ela Ema, says the Gemara, perhaps what we should say, turning to the top of Yud Gimel Amid Beis, and we'll be going about 3/4 of the way down this page. Kares Diamama the Rebbe Lesley. Maybe there is no kares during the day. Alamalo, why not? Mishkachasla, that there is no kares. The achal umtza v'chan ke umis. That if a person ate a piece of meat, umtza is meat, v'chan ke chenek, and he choked and died. And Rashi over here says 3 lines down, v'chan ke, or here he changes it, v'chan kesei. Shelo avar alav rega min hayom la'achar averaso. So what did the guy do? He ate on Yom Kippur, but he died while he was eating. So in that case, there's no time for you to do tshuva. You die with kares. Anyways, the Gemara says, "Inami da'achal samach l'shkias chama d'lo hava shehus l'chipur bei," or you ate right as shkia was setting, and therefore there was no time to get kapar. So either way, the Gemara therefore rejects the answer of Rava because we couldn't really figure out all the pieces of Rava, and therefore we conclude that the machlokes between the two stam sifras is one is Rebbe and one is Rabbi Yehuda, and our machlokes tanoim remains. Machlokes tanoim again, just to summarize, is that Rebbe is of the opinion that beinos hatshuva bein lo hatshuva yom kippur is mechaper, and Rebbe holds that that's not true. Yud Gimel Amid Beis, 4 lines down. Echad Yisrael v'echad Kohen v'echad Kohen Mashuach. What was this talking about? It says Gemara Hagufa Kasha. We have a problem because here you seem to put all of them, the Yisraelim, the Kohanim, and the Kohen Mashuach in the same group. Kohen Mashuach is the Kohen Gadol. Hagufa Kasha, because Ktani Echad Yisrael v'echad Kohanim v'echad Kohen Mashuach. That sounds like they're all the same. And then V'hadar Tani, what does it say later? Ma ben Yisrael Kohanim and Kohen Mashuach. What's the difference between them? And then it gives differences. So that means they're not the same. So don't say echad zeh ve'echad zeh and then say my ben zeh lo zeh. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, don't worry. Hachi kamar. This is how Rabbi Yehuda explains. Echad Yisrael ve'echad Kohanim ve'echad Kohen Mashuach. What is their common denominator of Yisraelim and Kohanim? Miskaprin b'seir hamishtalech b'sh'ar averos ve'en chiluk benin. That when it comes to she'ar averos, when it comes to non-tumas mikdash v'kodashav types of laws, the halacha is that they get tshuva from the seir mishtalech, the seir la'azazel, the one that gets thrown off a cliff. Ve'en chiluk beinehem, and there is no difference between the two of them. Uma bein Yisrael kohanim u'lekohen mashuach. What is the difference between Kohanim, Yisraelim and Kohanim? Ela shehapar mechaper ala Kohanim be'al tumas mikdash v'kodashav. That when it comes to the Kohanim, it's not the seir that's mechaper for Kohanim. It's the par. So while the outcome is the same, that they get tshuva, the korban is not the same. What effectuates tshuva, effectuates, I think that's a word, what brings about tshuva for a Kohen is a par. What brings about tshuva for a Yisrael is a seir. That's the difference between them. Umani, whose shita is this? This is Rabbi Yehuda. So let's not get confused. The Rav Yehuda, 8 lines down, is an Amora. That's Rav Yehuda. This is Rabbi Yehuda, which is why our typical syntax is Rabbi with a yud for a Tana. It's not always like that, but it usually is. The Tanya, where do we see this sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, that the par is mechaper? Says the Gemara, the Tanya. And let's learn the whole pasuk inside, and then we'll pick it apart. The pasuk says in Vayikra Tes Zayin, v'chiper es mikdash hakodesh, v'es ohel moed, v'es hamizbech yichaper, v'al hakohanim, v'al kol am hakahol yichaper. So let's pull this pasuk apart piece by piece. V'chiper es mikdash hakodesh ze lifnai v'lifnim. That means that if the Kohen Gadol lifnai v'lifnim is in the Holy of Holies and he becomes tamei, don't worry, Yom Kippur is mechaper. Es ol moed ze heichal, if he becomes tamei in the heichal, don't worry, Kohen Gadol, you're covered. Yom Kippur is mechaper. Mizbech kemashmo, if he gets tamei on the mizbech, don't worry, mechaper. Yechaper elu azaros, that means even in the azaros area, if he becomes tamei, no problem. And this is talking about Kohanim kemashman, that's who we're talking about. What does Amakal mean? Elu Yisrael. That's talking about Yisraelim. And what does Yechaper mean? Elu Halavim. Hushvu kulan lechapara achas shemiskaprin b'sir mishtalech b'shar averos divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Black on white, Rabbi Yehuda holds that when it comes to shar averos, not tumas mikdash v'kodashav, when it comes to all the other general averos, halacha is that all the Jews are similar and they get kapara in the same way with the sir hamishtalech. Kohanim and Levim and Yisraelim, they get kapara for she'ar averos, everything that's not tumas mikdash v'kodashav, from the seir hamishtalech. You'll recall that we only really spoke about seir la'Hashem when it came to tumas mikdash v'kodashav. We never really focused on the seir hamishtalech until now. And now the halacha is that the seir hamishtalech covers most of our averos. All that is Rabbi Yehuda. Third of the way down. Reb Shimon Omer, kishem shadam sa'ir, just like the seir hana'aseh bifnim, this is the seir la'Hashem, just like the blood of that is mechaper al Yisrael al tumas mikdash v'kodashav. That's the limited scope of the seir la'Hashem, is that it can impact tumas mikdash v'kodashav. Kach dam hapar mechaper al kohanim al tumas mikdash v'kodashav. So too, the blood of the par is mechaper on tumas mikdash v'kodashav. So here we're not talking about what we were talking about before, which is sha'ar averos. That was Rabbi Yehuda land. Reb Shimon is talking about something different. When it comes to tumas mikdash v'kodashav, the Yisraelim have this, and Kohanim have that. And continues the Gemara. Uchshem sheviduyo shel sa'ir hamishtalech mechaper al Yisrael b'shar averos. And just like it's the vidui of the sa'ir mishtalech that brings kapara for the Yisraelim b'shar averos, kach viduyo shel par mechaper al hakohanim b'shar averos. Here we see a divergent shita. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we said by sha'ar averos, kohanim and Yisraelim are the same. Sha'ar averos is mechaper through the sa'ir mishtalech. Reb Shimon says not that way. Reb Shimon says that the vidui by the Sir Mishtaleach helps Yisraelim by Sha'ar Averos, but in sharp contrast, he doesn't say that about Kohanim. By Kohanim, it's the vidui of the par that brings about the kapara for Sha'ar Averos for Kohanim. Says the Gemara, Ula Reb Shimon Havada Hushvu. There has to be a comparative point where they are the same, but you didn't paint one. They're not the same when it comes to Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav. One is par, one is Seir Lashem. And they're seemingly not the same for Vidui, for Kapara, for Sha'ar Averos, because one of them is Vidui for the Seir Mishtalech, one's a Vidui for the par. So where are they Hushvu? It says the Gemara, my Hushvu, and we're halfway down. The Bnei Kapara Nenu. Reb Shimon doesn't mean to say that the mechanism of Kapara is the same. All he means to say is that they both get Kapara. Don't take it so far. Rabbi Yehuda was a literalist. If it's hushvu, if they're comparable, so that means the same korban has to bring about that same result. But according to Shimon, no, the hushvu just means they both get kapara. How they get there, who cares? One of them gets it, not who cares, but one of them gets it this way, one of them gets it that way. So that's what he said that the hushvu was. So my hushvu, the bnei kapara, miu kol chad v'chad mechaper b'denafshay. Everyone has kapara in their own way. Kohanim like this and Yisraelim like that. My time at the Reb Shimon that he says this, says the Gemara, Dechsiv, Velakaches Shnei HaSeirim, Iskash, Seir HaMishtalech, L'Seir Nasa Bifnim. There's a hekesh between the Seir LaAzazel and the Seir LaHashem. Ma Seir HaNasa Bifnim, Enu Mechaper Ela Kohanim El Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav. The Seir LaHashem that only generates kapara for Kohanim for their tuma in the Mikdash. Dechsiv Be Asher La'am. That only applies to the people. The same thing is true with the Eretz Sir Mishtalech, that it's not going to be mechaper for Kohanim and Sha'ar Averos, rather the Vidues. I've Rabbi Yehuda. What is this hekish of Sir Mishtalech and Sir Lashem? Just that they should look similar, and that's it. We don't need anything more than that. So we're going to stop right here, but just to briefly summarize, we have a machlokes in what the comparisons are between the korbanos, with Rabbi Yehuda being more of a purist and saying that the kapara is same both in result and in mechanics. Sha'ar Averos is from Tzir Mishtalech. Ma'ashein Kain, Reb Shimon says it's not the purity of the hashva is that they both get kapara. How they get kapara? Different ways, different methods. We'll stop right here. Tomorrow is with Rabbi Handler, and Mir Hashem, I'll be back for Shabbos. Wishing you all a beautiful night.